Hello and welcome to this Tuts Plus series, Tumblr Theming 101. In this video, we'll be taking a closer look at theme operators. Theme operators are the difference between a Tumblr theme and a static HTML page. With a static HTML page, you would include your content inside your markup. With a Tumblr theme, we would include theme operators inside our markup, and then Tumblr would read these and return any content. Tumblr provides some really good documentation on its theme operators. There is a link to this in the description, and here is the page. The first tip I'll give is to make sure you check this page regularly or whenever you start a new theme. This is the first place that any new theme operators are documented. The Tumblr staff blog will do a release post on any new features, but if there are any changes to the theme operators, this is where they'll appear first. It's also worth reading the first few paragraphs as they give you a nice overview about Tumblr and some tips. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to jump down and I'm going to start on the section that discusses operators. So, Tumblr has two types of special operators used to render content in your HTML. Now, these two types are variables and blocks. For this video, we're going to concentrate on variables, and in the next video, we'll look at blocks. So, variables are used to insert dynamic data like your blog's title or description. So that is a definition of a variable, and below is an example of a variable. Now, before I continue, I'm just going to explain this sidebar here. This sidebar basically is a shortcut to the sections of the documentation. Now, the name of the link usually relates to the content. So, for instance, this link will relate to the post's content. And if you click it, you can see we have a table. Now, this follows suit throughout the entire documentation. The left-hand side will list off any variables or blocks that we can use related to posts, and then the right-hand side will give you a description of what that variable or block does. Okay, so I'll just go back to the definition of a variable. Okay, so as you can see in the example, we have our markup, and then, as I mentioned before, operators always start and end with a curly bracket. And as you can see here, we have a variable, and it is called title. Now, I like to look at variables like boxes with names on, and what we are saying to Tumblr is get the content with this name and push it into this box. So when someone views our page, we are saying here, get the content name title and put it here. That's essentially how variables work. Variables return content. This content isn't always text, it can be a wide range of things. It can be video, it can be audio, it can be images, it can be strings, it can be quite a few different things. It's also worth mentioning that both variables and blocks never usually follow the same principle, as in a variable won't just return text and a block won't just do one action. We'll explain further on that in the next video. So, to reiterate, we have our markup, we have our title tag, and then what we are asking Tumblr to do is to return the content related to title. Now, I know that this will return a HTML safe version of my blog's title. The reason I know that is because it is listed under the basic variable section. So again, as I mentioned, we have the variables on the left, or the variables of the box on the left, and we have the description on the right. And as the example had the variable name title, the description says it will return the HTML safe title of your blog. So to give you a visual example of this, I'm just going to go back to the HTML editor. I'm going to delete all this content, this code even, and then I'm going to include my HTML markup and then a theme variable named title. Okay. Now, If you click Update Preview, the theme preview has changed to a blank page and it has now returned the title of my blog. So the takeaway from this video is that we use variables to put content in our markup. That's the purpose of variables. If we go back to the documentation, we're under basic variables. So what we're then going to do is we're going to include a description of our blog using the variable name description. So underneath this, I'm going to include a paragraph. So again, as you can see, normal HTML markup, and then we use one of the the theme operators. So in this example, it's going to be description. Then click Update Preview, and as you can see, we have our title and we have our description. Now, if I just go back, you see these two boxes here, they relate to this content here. These boxes control this content. So this title box controls the title of our blog, and this description box controls the description for our blog. But this is where we input that content. So if I change this to as you can see, the theme preview is updated, and now Tumblr is still returning this content as it's been updated. So if I just go back to the HTML editor, as mentioned before, variables will return more than just text. And to give you an example of that, I'm going to include my avatar, or as Tumblr calls it, a portrait photo. Now, Tumblr is very good with images. It will always return more than one size of the same image. So in this instance, we have the variable name portrait URL -16, 24, 30, 40, and so on. What that's basically saying is it's going to return URL to our image at size 16 pixels by 16 pixels, 24 by 24 pixels, 30 pixels by 30 pixels, and so on. This happens pretty much for any image-based thing related to Tumblr. And this is where my second tip comes in. My second tip would be if you are uploading images to Tumblr, make sure they are at least 1280 pixels wide or high. The reason for this is the cap on images on Tumblr is 1280 pixels wide or high. So a theme could use a 500 pixel version of the image you've uploaded, or a theme could be displaying the highest resolution available. So always try and upload an image at the highest quality or the highest resolution you can. Tumblr, when you upload that image, will then handle the resizing and the generation of the different sizes for you, which I think is a great feature for a micro CMS, etc., or any CMS. So without going too far off the point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to include the portrait photo in my theme. Now, it's worth mentioning the documentation clearly states that it's going to return a URL. So it isn't going to return the image or the image tag, it's just going to return a URL to that image at this size, whatever size is appended on the end. So I would have to create my image markup, and then I would include the portrait URL variable inside the image markup. Again, all variables and all blocks always start and end with curly brackets. And now if I click Update Preview, you can see I have my avatar on my portrait photo. And because it's a new Tumblr account, I get one of the groovy default avatars, which are pretty cool. So that's an example of a variable returning something that isn't text-based. Even though in reality it is returning a string, it is a string related to an image. So what I'm trying to get home here is that variables are used to include content in your markup, and variables will also return content that isn't just a string. It can be related to an image, it can be related to a video embed, a audio embed, etc, etc. Now in the next video we'll be taking a look at the second part of theme operators called blocks. So I do hope you'll join us then.